Introduce myself real quick. My name is TJ Jurian. I'm the program coordinator with the Office of Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer, and Intersex Life. Very happy to sponsor this keynote tonight. I just wanted to take a minute to also thank our co-sponsors, the Dean of Students Office, Bishop Joseph Johnson Black Cultural Center, Leadership Development and Intercultural Affairs, Office of Active Citizenship and Service, the Women's and Gender Studies Program, Multicultural Leadership Council, Community Vanderbilt, and the Vanderbilt chapter of NAACP. So thank you all very much for your help and support in bringing Mandy Carter to campus. In terms of introducing Mandy, she has been someone that I've been looking forward to bringing to a campus that I've been either a student at or working at. So it's an absolute pleasure to have her here. To say that she's a force and a legend within progressive activism and coalition building is definitely an understatement. Mandy Carter is one of the leading African-American lesbian activists in the country. She has a 42-year movement history of social, racial, and LGBTQI justice organizing since 1968. She's committed to multiracial, multi-issue organizing, and she's attributed her influences to the Quaker-based American Friends Service Committee, the former Institute for the Study of Nonviolence, and the pacifist-based War Resisters League to her long-sustained activism. It was specifically her participation in the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. inspired 1968 Poor People's Campaign, organized by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, that solidified her lifetime commitment to nonviolence. The Poor People's Campaign was the last project that Dr. King was working on before his untimely assassination in Memphis, Tennessee on April 4th, 1968. Mandy Carter has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize as part of the 1,000 Women for the Nobel Peace Prize 2005 in order to recognize, make visible, and celebrate the impressive and valuable, yet often invisible peace work of thousands of women around the world. She has also helped found two groundbreaking organizations, Southerners on New Ground and the National Black Justice Coalition. The National Black Justice Coalition is the only current national civil rights organization of concerned Black, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals and allies dedicated to fostering equality by ending racism and homophobia. At the 100th convention of the NAACP in 2009, a partnership was born with the National Black Justice Coalition when the NAACP LGBT Equality Task Force was rolled out. So the NBJC has definitely been a huge force in the country in making some historical progress in the work of intersections of race and LGBT issues. And Southerners on New Ground's purpose is to build progressive movement across the South by developing models of organizing that connect race, class, culture, gender, and sexual and gender identity. And specifically, SONG integrates work against homophobia into freedom struggles in the South. So Mandy Carter definitely has a lot of work in the South and experience here in Nashville as well as North Carolina, where she's driving in from since yesterday. But I wanted to obviously give a lot more time to Mandy to speak. Y'all didn't come here to hear me talk about her, but rather to hear from her. But I just wanted to give folks a quote that she said in 2007 that for me really solidifies the kind of activist that Mandy is and the reason why I personally admire her so much. And it was about the Southerners on New Ground organization. The underlying principle of SONG has never been about promoting SONG as much as it is the values of the work. Because we decided this is more important, it takes out a lot of the stuff that gets in the way. SONG has always been about how do we pass along stuff, engage in conversation, so it's not always about asking folks to come to our table, the SONG table. Instead, it's about going to other people's tables, going to where people are. We go and listen, or we go to a third space. We did a complete inventory of the South, a listening. This mapping of who we know is out there against the backdrop of race, class, age, and then we did visiting of those folks or efforts, and it did create a relationship so that we could know what people are doing. Now we're going into our 13th or 14th year and it still works. Visiting other tables always works. So without further ado, please help me welcome Mandy Carter.
Thank you. Can you all hear me back there? Yeah? Great. Well, I want to say a couple of things. First of all, the idea that it's now the year 2011, it's a new decade, and thinking about when I go around to campuses, I'm really actually in a quest to hear what people are thinking, where we are now, where we've been, and what the potential could be for the future. So when I got this wonderful email, now you notice email is how I get my call. I don't even get any calls. I get an email. Hey, Mandy, what you doing? What are the dates here? I can't remember. Yeah, I can come to Vanderbilt, no problem. It's, you know. And since that relationship with TJ, but also just thinking about it's now Black History Month. And what does that mean for folk? There was a time there was nothing on this campus, no women's center, no Black culture study, no nothing. And here we are in the year 2011, and we have all these incredible things happening on college campuses across the country. And the fact that we now have what I would call almost, in my opinion, a miracle or something that happened that we would have our first Black president in our lifetime is astounding. And so I'm thinking that we really do have to pause for a minute and think about who came before us, how we got to be where we are now and where we're going. So tonight I really want to have more of a conversation. I told TJ I'm not really into speechifying. I'm really into figuring out how we can have kind of a conversation with each other. And we're going to leave room at the end to have Q&A, comments, you know, some give and take, to really get a figure out how we have this conversation. So if that's okay with you, and it's very informal. I'm a little happy that I've got a few people up front. I did take a shower this morning. I'm not going to bite you. I'm not going to ask you questions out of turn. So if you'll relax a little bit and we're going to be good, we'll go ahead and start. But before I begin, I want to make sure that at the back table, we have a lot of good material on the back table to your right. There's a wonderful table with National Black Justice Coalition material on there. And also, if you're interested in staying in touch with the group, there's a little sign-up thing you can fill out for me. But please take that stuff and avail yourself of it. I'm here today, I'll be here tomorrow, and I'll be here on Thursday, so I am around. And I know I'm going to be over at the Oasis Center tomorrow from 4 to 5:30 or something, so was able to make that happen. So are we good? We ready to start? Good. Well, I'm going to try to stick to my notes because I tend to ramble and I don't want to get off track because I want to leave time at the end. So here we go. Well, good evening. Happy Black History Month. And I have to say it's great to be here celebrating it with you at Vanderbilt. And my talk really has more, like I said, to have more of a conversation with you now that we're starting this new decade, and really figure out how we can have some real conversation. I live in Durham, North Carolina. Any North Carolinians here, born, raised, but we're at, or a few where in North Carolina? Charlotte. Charlotte just got picked to be the site of the Democratic National Convention in 2012. And if that does not send a message about why Obama and the Democrats decided to go to Charlotte, no disrespect for the Midwest, they were also bidding for it, but that speaks volumes. And I'll have to say that when I'm here, I have to tell you that as someone who was raised in 2 orphanages and a foster home for my first 18 years as the ward of the state of New York, that had it not been for the American Friends Service Committee coming into my high school class back in 1965, I would not be standing here in front of you now. And I say that because I wonder when we're doing our activist organizing or when we're out there advocating for what we believe in, are we going out to get to where people are versus asking people to come to where we are? I'm not sure if I would have run into them had they not come to my high school. But when I had lunch earlier this afternoon with a number of the sponsoring folk, I had said to them that when that class happened in my social studies class in Schenectady, New York in 1965, there were a couple of things said to me then that have lived with me to this day. And one of them was this concept of the power of one, that every single one of us has the potential to impact change if we choose to act on it, every one of us. And to hear that from a society that basically tells you from the get that unless you have huge numbers and you have some kind of credibility and a lot of money, you can't make change. The American Friends Service Committee, who was down south as a predominantly white peace organization, talking about how change happens as allies, to hear that for a young, not even sure if I was out at that point, Black kid sitting in a predominantly white school in Schenectady, New York, had a profound impact on me. The other thing that they said that also had a profound impact on me was that because they believe in the concepts of nonviolence, philosophy and politics and action, that if your underlying philosophy for why you do what you do is is a sense of equality and justice for all, that really means that no matter what comes down the road in terms of all the movements that we've seen in my 43 years of organizing, that equality and justice for all, when that maintains that wonderful underlying purpose, then you don't tend to get stuck into silos. I'm only doing women's issues. I'm only doing environmental issues. I only do name the list. That equality and justice for all really starts to really show the interconnectedness that we have. But the third thing they said that was most important was, after I got all jazzed about all this, by the way, we have a one-week high school work camp in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania. Who would like to go? My hand went flying up. Because when you get inspired by something and you're trying to figure out what to do with it, by giving people the tools or something that allows you to go and do something with that, with this one-week high school work camp, that really solidified for me it's possible to take what I feel and what I believe in into action. And the work camp was unique because it brought in all kinds of wonderful resources, people. There was maybe 20 of us. In the day, it's a work camp, we were picking the crops that we would eat that night for our dinner. And then the other part of the day were people like Guy and Candy Carowin of the Highlander Center, which is right down the road here in Knoxville, white folk singers who talked about the importance of song and singing. Civil rights movement was full of all that, about how that can also be a way of how you make change, cultural work. Getting to know people that really worked with Gandhi and had a direct influence and a direct impact on the work that was done there. So with those tools in mind, while I had thought about I wanted to be a medical doctor, this is in 1965, 66. We had already, it was a very tumultuous year. Anyone, let me ask this. Anyone in this room that was born between the years of 1945 or 46 and 1955? Anyone? Okay. Well, that's that World War II baby boomer generation, which is now 78 to 79 million people in this population. So those of us of the 1960s are now 60, 62, joined AARP when I was 50. I say that because this cultural demographic has a huge impact, already has had a huge impact on this country. And whether anyone out there calls themselves as an activist or an organizer or socially aware or something, to know that you have a huge generation, and I'm only one of many, to know that people who are back in the 1960s, too young for the civil rights movement, just old enough for that whole anti-war movement, the feminist movement, the lesbian feminist movement, name the groups that came after that, that demographic is still having a huge impact on our society now. And so, even though I wanted to be a doctor, I thought, how long does it take to become a doctor? I mean, we're talking many years. And we were living with the sirens going off and duck and cover and run home. And so the sense of stability, would I even be around to be a doctor? I decided I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to be a doctor of societal ills. That's what I'm going to become a doctor of. I'm going to become an activist. And I hitchhiked out to California and went to the Institute for the Study of Nonviolence, so on and so forth. So I give you that backdrop because if I am living in two orphanages in a foster home and I got that information, there's no reason why when everyone's out here with all the regular things, your backgrounds, why you couldn't get that information if people come to where we are to part that information with us. Now, I do want to thank the Vanderbilt Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer, and Intersex Office, am I saying of life? That. I think you're one of the few places that has intersex on your name. I got the queer in that, but that's unique, and I want to thank you for that because every one of those letters took a movement. It didn't come easy. I just said to TJ, it used to be just the H word, homosexual, but remember, then it became gay, and we lesbians said, no, you're not really relating to our life, so let's make sure we add the L word. And then we had to fight about the B word. That was hard and that was tight. And then we had to fight and organize and fight around the T word. That was tight, but they're all there now. But to add the word queer, now I must tell you that as a black woman, when I go to meetings and I can't use that word, I'll ask up front, is it okay to use it? And they say, no, Mandy, I don't want to hear that. Just generational, I won't. Other folk are claiming it, owning it, not a problem. But the intersex movement, these are real movements, so the fact that we can say all these letters is really important, so I want to thank you for that. And I also want to thank the co-sponsoring organizations that are sponsoring me as well. So TJ and Nora and Michael and the people who gave me my ride, Liz and Katie. So Dr. Dobson's not here, I don't think. Is he in the room or not? Well, when we had lunch, it turned out that Dr. Dobson has family up in Albany, New York, where I was born, and he has some Carter people. We might be kin, and I didn't even know it. It might be possible. So when he comes in, I'll acknowledge that that's something that we might have to find out that we have in common. So like TJ said, I do bring you greetings on behalf of Southerners on New Ground, founded in 1993. But I want to give a short story about why we got this group started, because I think it helps with this whole issue of intersectionality and why it's important when we talk about who we are as people, the many identities that we walk through every single day. The National Gay and Lesbian Task Force is one of the second national LGBT groups in the country, and they do this conference called Creating Change. It happens every year. In fact, Nora, we were just there in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Back in 1993, they were going to do the conference somewhere else, and the conference fell through, and because I knew Ivy Young, who coordinates the conference, called me up and said, Mandy, do you mind if we bring the Creating Change conference to Durham, North Carolina? Because if we do, it's the first time it will have ever been held in the South. And I said, absolutely, we would love to have Creating Change in Durham, North Carolina. So once we made that commitment, we formed a local host committee, the normal stuff, and then the phone calls started coming through. And here's some of the nature of those calls. And these are our people, remember, this is our LGBT and ally people. So is there an airport there? And yeah, it's Raleigh-Durham. It's 10 minutes from where we're going to have the conference. And, well, will we be able to get regular food? And what are grits anyway? And then there was, and this is the tone they took. And so why are we having it in North Carolina? Isn't that where Jesse Helms is from? People know who Jesse Helms is, right? We're having it in North Carolina precisely because that's where Jesse Helms is from. Then the last one was the kicker. Are the streets paved down in Durham, North? And I said, what do you think you're coming to? The anti-Southern bias. And I know it ain't just the LGBT. I have women, you name it. What is the deal? And so a number of us who have been very active, and I use the term active progressive lesbians for a reason. So those of us who knew each other said, well, maybe we better do a workshop about being out, lesbian, progressive, and have a workshop, and so when y'all are asking these questions, you might understand why it's no big deal. Well, that workshop that we held was the kernel of what became Southerners on New Ground. Because we realized in that workshop, for the first time, we're looking at each other and we're thinking, wait a minute, if you're in the South, and if you're a person of color or a non-person of color, and you're a lesbian, and you're progressive talking about social justice issues across the board, what would happen if we were to look at those connections? And so when you read that litany of, it's about building transformative models of organizing in the South that connect race, class, culture, big thing in the South, gender, sexual identity, gender identity. And then we said, well, that's it, we're good, we know what we're doing. But we did something unique that I wanted to say that's a lesson learned. I can't tell you every time I've been asked when an all-white group comes to me and says, Mandy, how can we get more people of color to our meeting? And I said, first of all, you never should have formed your group to begin with before you had the conversation with the folk you wanted to try to get to be a part of your group. But that said, I said, because if you do not begin to understand that at the vision of what you're trying to get to, you need to have that from the get to start with, even if it's hard. So when we decided to form Southerners on New Ground, it was 3 white progressive lesbians. Suzanne Farr from Little Rock, Arkansas, wrote one of the best books, Homophobia, a Weapon of Sexism. We had Pam McMichael, who's now the director of the Highlander Center from Louisville, Kentucky, already involved in labor organizing in where she was in Louisville. And Mab Segrist, one of the best lesbian Southern writers we know, who was doing work or anti-organizing against the Klan as an out white lesbian in Durham, North Carolina. We then had 3 black progressive lesbians, Pat Hussein, Atlanta, Georgia, who was organizing Olympics out of Cobb. Remember the Olympics going in and they were saying they wanted to use Cobb County. Great activist down in Atlanta, Georgia. Joan Garner, who just got elected as one of the first blackout lesbian something or other in her county and down in Georgia, and Mandy Carter in Durham, North Carolina. So these 6 people got together back in 1993 and had a vision. It wasn't a whole lot of folk, but we're now going into our 17th year, so we must have had something right to figure out why this was important. The other group that we also helped co-found, and again, I think there's this interesting thing about, I was saying that one of the lessons I've learned in organizing, don't mourn organize. If there's a need, fill it. Don't mourn organize. If there's a need, fill it. Many times we are trying to do this work, wherever our respective work might be, and we bump up against this constant, we've always done it this way, we're never going to change, don't even try to do all that. So what do? Most people throw their hands up in frustration. I don't know what else to do. There's nothing I can do. No, there is something you can do. Don't mourn organize. If there's a need, fill it. Why do you think we have women's centers on college campuses? Because someone finally said we need to have women's centers on college campuses. Why do we have women's studies? Why do we have, name the list. Because someone said, this always these questions. What would happen if we fill in the blank? What would happen if we fill in the blank? Or you'll say, you know what we need? We need fill in the blank. That becomes the nucleus of why we have things that become groups and or social justice movements. So when you have that, then it seems like the frustration level tends to come down. You realize it might just be you or one other person to begin with, but you start where you start. And so one of the desperate needs we found with the Black, les, bi, gay, trans, same-gender loving community was that we had to have a voice. We had to have a voice, and we had to have something like a container that would allow us, no matter where we lived in this country, to figure out how we fit and how we belong in this thing called a civil rights movement. But specifically why we formed the National Black Justice Coalition in 2003 were a couple of reasons. There used to be a group called the National Black, Gay, and Lesbian Leadership Forum that was around for quite some time. They decided to close. I was on there, and a number of other people were. And when we looked around after they closed, we figured out it was critical for us to have another organization. But what really kicked it into kickstart was, remember when Massachusetts finally got that historic state Supreme Court decision legalizing same-sex marriage up in the state of Massachusetts? Remember that? And I had worked on that many years before, going around the state of Massachusetts, specifically going into communities of color and faith-based communities. And there were two plaintiffs, one black lesbian named Gina Smith from Northampton, and one black gay man named David Wilson from Boston. They were part of the 16 people that were part of it. And for GLAD, gay, lesbian advocates and defenders, to have those people on this case was pivotal, because they understood that if you talk about the issue of marriage equality, name it, if you do not have the diversity of what truly is our collective movement, it does a tremendous disservice. But also think about this. Who were the last set of people that dealt with marriage equality in this country? Interracial marriage was against the law, y'all, remember? And had it not been for the U.S. Supreme Court Loving versus Virginia in 1967, that's who dealt with this before us. And a lot of what happened with that case had a huge impact on the court cases we have now. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but if I knew that what I was going up against was a couple named Loving versus the state of Virginia, I would have said, y'all won, because just the name alone should have given you a clue. But when that case was announced, I would call the predominantly white conservative right groups like the Christian Coalition, Focus on the Family, Promise Keepers, Concerned Women for America, who are very anti-gay, decided to hold a rally on the steps of the Boston City Hall to state their outrage about the fact that the Massachusetts State Supreme Court made this decision. And they had a black minister come in from Chicago. And it's not unusual for the predominantly white conservative right to bring black folk in, because they had been trying since day one to divide us on this issue, because, as they said, we're reading out of the same book, the Bible, and the Bible said gay is bad. So they had this conservative black minister come into this rally. And this is what this black minister said. If the Klan were to ride against the gays, I would ride with them. I'll repeat what I just said. If the Klan were to ride against the gays, I would ride with them. Who in the hell the Klan was riding against last? And this is a black man and a minister. I cannot even begin to wrap my head, my heart, or my soul around that comment. Unbelievable. And he was bragging about it. So a lot of us who understand about marriage equality coming before us LG people, we say, we ain't having this. Not only are we not having this, but we have to stand up and really say loudly and clearly, no, you don't. I want to look at some 1099s of some of these preachers out here going around, because I want to know what they're getting paid. I'm not kidding. But also, the outrage of hearing that, because the Klan doesn't like Jewish people, they don't like gay people, they don't like gay people, and they'll murder you. They'll lynch you, they'll kill you. 16th Street Baptist Church, 13 days after the 1963 March on Washington, 4 young black girls killed because it was a bombing by the Klan. That's who he wants to ride with? It's an outrage. And I'm going to tell you right now, whether you're LGBT or not, or even an ally, this cannot go on without someone speaking up. So we decided, we just said, don't mourn organize. We got our little pennies together and we rented a space at the National Press Club up in Washington, D.C. I think we barely made it. We got an extra quarter that made it good. And we held a press conference, and who was there? It was people like me, and we had a black gay male couple, a black lesbian couple, saying that we do believe in marriage equality as an issue. And we had this press conference, had no clue whether anyone was interested or not, didn't know, but there was a writer from the Washington Post and went online, boom, we got the press. And that was probably the first time that I thought, in my opinion, this whole issue that we were talking about tonight, when we saw the real diversity of faces of color on this, because up until now, quite frankly, most of it had been white. But to say this issue is relevant. So that became the basis for why we began the National Black Justice Coalition. So I shared both of these stories with you, just to underscore the lessons I think I've learned. I already said that if we figure out that we're looking at an issue that seems impossible, and I will say this as well, within communities of color, this is a tough one. I don't have to kid any of you, you know that. But it's not just the black community dealing with this issue. It's the Latino community, the Asian Pacific Islander community, Two-Spirit community, where we have got to figure out why we can add in the issue of civil rights as a civil rights issue to the laundry list. But also what I like about Don't Mourn Organize If There's a Need, Philip, you just heard me say on these campuses where we never had these things that we have them now, and I'm looking at the list that co-sponsored my visit. Women and Gender Studies, Black, Latino, Hispanic, Asian Pacific Islander, the LGBT Center, name the list. Because we realized when I come to campus, I used to be asked by the Women's Center over here, Mandy, can you come to my thing? And then I get another call, Mandy, can you come to my black thing? And Mandy, can you come? And I said, don't pull me apart, just do one thing and bring you all together, because I am all three. And how many of us wake up every day in those multiple identities every day? And so people began to wake up and think, oh yeah, I guess it is kind of all the same issue, isn't it? And intersectionality makes a difference. So now that we're starting a new decade, I think this is a good time to do some reflecting from the past and looking ahead to the future against a backdrop of what I would call 2 very notable things happening right now. By 2050, this country will be majority people of color. And the state of California already is by 2050. But then if you think about it, this is how these lands started to begin with, isn't it? Who was here before these ships pulled up to these shores? Who was indigenous to these lands before any ship pulled up and decided to colonize and make this thing called the United States of America? What was Arizona, Texas, New Mexico? Who was living there? Who was living up in the Northwest we call Washington and Oregon? And, you know, there was already people here, indigenous people here. And look what happened to them. Look what happened. And then you have 400 years of a thing called slavery when we were brought to these shores. And look what happened to us. And I'm thinking, well, United States of America and the founding fathers, you had to be a slave owner to be one. And I mean, this history of how we got to be what we call the United States of America is critical. At the Creating Change Conference, we had this amazing opening plenary of Two-Spirit people from Minnesota. And they talked about the reality of where they are now in the year 2011 and what happened to their lands, what happened to their people, what happened to their culture. And I was sitting there as a black person with my legacy of slavery, and I'm thinking, that's my history too. And how do we, when we think collectively of this country, talk about that? What about the Japanese internment camps during World War II? Name you the list. And then I'm also thinking in reality about the connections. For the people who did settle here, how were women treated? Couldn't vote, didn't have any rights. And they figured out we have to figure out what we're going to do about this issue, about women having no rights. They were human beings. Formed this thing called the suffrage movement. And then I'm thinking, who came after the women after they had to fight for their right to vote? Slaves weren't even human beings. We had to take care of that twice with the U.S. Supreme Court. And then we had to fight like the Dickens for our rights to vote, to ride in public transportation, to have a place to live, to have a job. Women and people of color are connected like this historically when you think about gender, race, ethnicity. We have a legacy of having to fight for every single thing in terms of those rights that we should get as full citizens of this country based on gender and being people of color. Women couldn't run for office. We didn't have access to all the things that we think about now that we think we just get because, and people of color. So for me, when I think about who laid down the foundation for what I perceive to be the lesbian, gay, trans movement for equality, which is no longer if, it's when. We just won on the don't ask, don't tell. We're about ready maybe to get marriage equality, and most importantly of all, non-discrimination in the workplace. But my concern is that I'm not so sure that our lesbian, gay movement has really even thought about who came before us, let alone thinking who came before us, because if we get these things, which is almost inevitable, if we do not look back and think about who came before us and the struggles and the fights that had to happen to make this happen, then I think we're losing sight of it, and we're very short-sighted, and it concerns me. So when we talk about some of the key issues as we go forward, that is one, remembering our history of where we came from. And if we do get all these things, here's my other concern. I've actually had people say to me in the gay movement, well, you know what, when I can get married, I've got mine, I'm done. I'm out of here. I have everything I want. Name me the list. And so I said, well, wait a minute, are you saying that the only reason why you're involved in this movement is because we want your rights? Is that it? Yeah, that's right. And no, but I think part of it is because of the door we come through. The door that I came through when I became an activist was the door of equality and justice. It was fighting the Vietnam War movement. It was supporting all the other issues, so that my door was a very bigger vision. But how do you become a part of the gay movement? You literally just show up. You go to a pride, you go to a lesbian bar, you go to whatever door. But I'm not saying it's bad. I just think that if the movement does not begin to understand the expanded idea and vision of what equality is, then we end up in a little bit of a trap because we did not get understanding of the full vision. I'm going to share a short story with you to let you know. I live in North Carolina where there's a huge farm industry of all sorts, you name it. Tobacco's less, we have now replaced that with soy crops. But what used to be black labor in the South is now hugely Latina that's coming in. And one of the big crops that we have in Eastern Carolina is cucumbers. What do you make out of cucumbers? Pickles. There's a place called Mount Olive Pickle Company in Mount Olive, North Carolina. And the location of that business is literally at the corner of Cucumber and Vine. I kid you not. So you know how seriously they take pickles. This is a small, rural, out there in the middle of nowhere, but the industry is cucumbers. Who's picking those cucumbers? What's the quality of life with these people who are picking those cucumbers? What are they getting paid? Where do they live? These are families living out here. And so when Mount Olive is figuring out, you got complaints, nothing you can do about it because we're the ones who are giving you a job and a place to live. That attitude, you need us more than we need you. So all of a sudden, remember Cesar Chavez out in California with the United Farm Worker Movement? If anyone needed to learn a lesson about don't ever take anyone not seriously when they tell you we need to figure out how we organize for the quality of life for farm workers. There's a Farm Labor Organizing Committee, FLOC. They pulled a meeting together in Durham, North Carolina. Southerners on New Ground was at that table. Remember I told you about cross issues. And they had a meeting to talk about how can we make sure people understand that the quality of life and equal rights has to do with just as much for Mount Olive as it does for anyone else. And one of the things the song could bring to the table was the idea that we would organize our lesbian, gay, trans community because after all, we're about equality too, aren't we? My first phone call was to a lesbian friend, and this is exactly what she said to me. Cucumbers? What's that got to do with my gay rights, Mandy? If you want to call me about something with gay rights, I'll come out, but I have no interest in pickles. And I was stunned, and I cried because I realized if we had not done a better job of understanding for her that equality meant equality not just for her, but for everyone, then maybe she wouldn't have answered that phone that way. But it made me realize that maybe our broader movement is making the biggest mistake as well. So I then said to her, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but we're going to do this, and we were engaged. And the good news, after 5 years, we won it, and we got a union, we got better conditions at Mount Olive. But it made me realize that if we do not take this message to the broader LGBT movement, of color or not, then we lose. But it also made me realize, I said, wait a minute. You know, has anyone been to San Francisco Pride? Anyone been? You do Pride. You know how huge that is, right? You do a Pride here, don't you do a Pride in Nashville? You do Black Pride, too. One of the San Francisco Prides had this huge rainbow flag. You know how the rainbow flags are everywhere. Then all of a sudden, there's these huge red and black flags of the United Farm Worker Union. Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta were in that pride marching, and I remember someone saying, well, what are the farm workers doing here? And I said, because they're here for equality and justice. It was just like a light bulb went off. That's what this is about. They were there, and we oftentimes never show up except to our stuff. So that was a lesson learned in terms of how it makes a difference and why we have to be fully engaged. The other thing that I would say to you in terms of concern I have, getting ready to kind of wrap up, when we win marriage equality, I have a question. Why do I have to get married, gay or straight, to get stuff that we should just get because we're human beings, right? I mean, why isn't that just something you get without marriage as an institution? And as someone who's been a lifelong pacifist, I don't want to be sending a lot of people into the military as an option for a job. I'm not interested in doing that. Understanding we know that there are gay and lesbian people in the military, no disrespect. But because we just have this interesting thing about, well, what are our values about? And a lot of us came from the 60s movement where we didn't think the military was such a great idea, or militarism. I don't want to open up college campuses to JROTC or ROTC. You know, there's got to be a better way in which you have a living without having to kill or be killed somewhere. So we have to have some longer conversations what we mean about equality and justice in terms of this point. And I might never get married. I know I'm not going to military, but I do need a JOB. So why aren't we looking at the Employment Non-Discrimination Act as a real bona fide, I can get it, I can relate in terms of how we move forward with our allies as we go. So in wrapping up, I just have a couple of quick final points to make. One thing that I would say to you that we have in common in every single movement has been the changing of hearts and minds, why we do marches, why we do all the kind of visible things that we do, rallies, you name it, but the changing of public policy. When we tried to have equal education and access down south, had it not been for a great lawyer, former Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, who said, as a lawyer, let's take this to court and figure out how we have equal access to education. And do you think once that battle was won that people the next day woke up and said, yep, you're right, that's what we need? Hell no. People were still pushing back. And when we won the interracial battle around Loving versus Virginia, did people wake up the next day and go, yeah, we understand? Hell no. But sometimes you have to figure out how laws get passed and on the books to secure those issues about equality. So by the partnering of hearts and minds and public policy, I don't know who wants to be a lawyer out here. I don't know who wants to run for public office. I don't know who wants to do all these vital, important things that we need for the movement for social justice that really makes it vibrant and vital. That we have learned. And to bring it back around again to the 2008 elections, to know that we had a woman named Hillary Rodham Clinton when women couldn't even vote, let alone hold public office, to Barack Obama, who was the son of an interracial marriage, black, name it, and to have these options, you know that a lot of that history had gone before, and history made the difference in terms of what we have now. So I would say to you, in my opinion, I think our collective lesbi, gay, trans, queer, intersex movement has a key question to answer, and how they answer this question and act on that question has a lot to do with where we go. And that question is this: are we about justice, or are we about just us? Because that question and how that is acted on and how we answer it will make a huge difference in how we all collectively go forward. And the good news is this: if we're about justice, it includes us. So why don't we figure it out and figure out that it can't just be, I only want LGBT whatever and I'm over here and I'm good. and name me anyone else who wants to do this individual silo thing, when we all have to look at each other collectively and figure out how we do move forward. And I will also say to you that I have a feeling, an optimist, that we are getting it. Look at this room. Look who invited me to come. Look at the changes happening around this country generationally. And my hope, you know where my hope is? The kids. That's what my hope is with. Generationally, that's going to make a difference. So with that, I will say to you, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm going to invite you to be a part of something very exciting that's going to happen over the next 3 years that I would love to have Vanderbilt and the community involved in. You know, it's Black History Month, right? And you know we always do the King holiday, right? Well, one of the most not known, never heard of, but so critical to the civil rights movement was a man by the name of Bayard Rustin, Black, gay, pacifist who introduced the concepts of Gandhian nonviolence to a civil rights movement that we will always remember, but because he was Black and gay, he was literally written out of the history books. Well, we need to bring him back into the history books and all he believed in. Bayard's 100th anniversary is next year, Bayard Rustin Centennial. And so the National Black Justice Coalition is organizing a year-long centennial, but the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington is in 2013, so it's 2012, 2013, and should Obama get reelected, which I think he will, he'll start his second four-year term on the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington in 2013 when black folk couldn't even vote. So a Bayard to Barack narrative is what we're looking at, and we would like to make sure that anyone in any state, any campus, any group, any, what's the name of your meet and greet, the lesbian something meet something group, what's the name of your group? Yeah, that. You're all invited to be a part of it. So if you could, again, you have material in the back, and I think this is just a great way. And also, if you know of anyone who was there on August 28th, 1963, we need to know who you are, because we're going to work with the national NPR to do a story corps. I'm going back in August 28th, 2013, and I'm going to bring with me, and then who you're going to bring with you, and tell your story, which would be great. And or people who just want to make sure that they're a part of that history because they weren't even born yet, but they'll be a part of. So, sound good? Is that exciting? Is that great? I'm done. So, TJ's gonna play Oprah. You know, Oprah has a new show now. Has anyone watched it? Anyone seen her new? What's it called? OWN, Oprah Winfrey Network. Sister Spheres, y'all. So we have about 30 minutes, and what I would like to do with this 30 minutes. Hey, Dwayne, guess what I'm wearing? The National Black, let's see, National Black Pride. Dwayne in the house. For the next 30 minutes, this is just really question, answer, comment. Let's just open it up, okay? All right. TJ's going to play Oprah. Who's going to be the brave soul who's going to raise their hand with their first comment or something? Oh, got one in the back.
I always go to talks like these and hear about exciting things, and I just wonder, how can you actually get involved? I mean, it sounds really good, but then I go home and, you know, get on Facebook and forget about it. How can you actually?
Well, it might seem
that into action?
right. It might be easier than what people think. Show up. I mean, there's so many. I guess what I'll say. First of all, you have to ask, what am I interested in? What really excites me? Oftentimes, people go to things that are relevant to their lives. So if you know that there's a number of tables here in Nashville doing all kinds of work, and you try to figure out where can I fit in. Now, a key part of it would be showing up, if you're really seriously showing up and not saying I want to talk about my agenda, I want to know what you're doing and how I can feel a part of, or what can I bring my gifts to, whatever this might be. And I can tell you, if we're sitting in this room right now, there's a lot of other rooms meeting around what the heck is going on with this upcoming 2-year cycle, whether it's the state or whether it's what's happening in Washington. We're not the only people who meet around these issues. But I would also say to you, it might mean what issues are relevant to people's lives. A living wage campaign. How many people are scrambling for a job? I live literally paycheck to paycheck right now. Living wage, health, if you have children, education, name you the list. But it might be needing a little inventory to find out what's out there and maybe think outside our own, you know, who we know in our own circle. There's other circles around. So I would just say, but showing up and being sincere about it, and not only showing up once, but coming back. I had a white friend of mine in San Francisco, and she wanted to know how she could get more people of color to her meeting.
Right.
And I said to her, have you ever thought about going to this other meeting with me? And it was the people of color. But Mandy, I might be the only one. I had been the only one at meetings all of my life. But when she said it, you almost can hear her catching herself, because when she said, but I might be the only one. But this is honest, this is real for people. And if we can be honest and sincere and just willing to take the risk. And when she said that, you could hear her catching herself and said, I'm willing to go. When she got there, she literally was the only one. Let me ask this question right now. How many people right now in this room have ever been to an all people of color meeting when you've been the only one? Be honest. How many? Okay. And were you a little nervous or not? You knew you had to be there, you're there. People want you there. People are saying, thank you for being here. But if we don't take the chance of getting up and getting out of our safe space, which is, you can always go back to the safe space, right? But that would help. But what issues mean something to you? So that's key. But show up and be for real, right? It's overly simple, but I think that's key. That's part of it. And know what's happening. Next, there you go. TJ's rushing right over with the mic. You ever notice when Oprah does that? She's just like, what does she do? Whoa! I watched her on Oprah. This is good. She did something. She just has this really wonderful. Well, we're gonna. And she this energy of hers is amazing. And you know, and anything that touches Oprah, am I wrong? Dr. Phil. What's the other guy? Right?
So what would you consider some of your biggest hurdles that or challenges that you've had to face on this kind of journey or path towards social justice?
Yeah. Is that on? It's not. Is that working?
Is it working?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, I have to tell you, I was just telling TJ, I used to be scared to death to do these things. Has anyone had to give up and give a speech? Then I finally figured out, don't do it as a speech. You know, I opened with, I'm just having a conversation. It takes the pressure right off. But also, I think for me, now, I used to be a cheerleader, I'll admit it. I loved being a cheerleader. People used to make fun of us, but that was a moment in my life that was really important to me. And I was also saying that when I was a cheerleader in 1965, 66 at Mount Pleasant High School, I couldn't have natural, I had to hot comb my hair. People, sisters know what I'm talking about. You had the Dixie Peach and the hot comb. I still have burns on my neck. That I did not like. Because to be one of the few black cheerleaders in a school that is connected as GE, you know, that was amazing. And I was living in the home. So to have the validation of being a cheerleader, which is one of the most important things on that campus, was very important to me. But I've always been a people person, you can tell, right? But that was hard. Now I just have conversations with people. But the other one that I really wanted to also mention, if I had to say to you, other than this idea of don't go and organize if there's a need, fill it, and how many times have we been told it's either or, you have to make a choice the only way? But when I figured out that when you use the word and, it opens up the whole world. And people are resistant to that. So when someone says, well, Mandy, I used to go to all black meetings, and I would hear a friend say to me, now, Mandy, whatever you do, don't bring up that lesbian thing in this meeting. They're not ready to hear it. In my black meetings. Then I would go over to now, and I would hear during the Lavender Menace, what was the Lavender, whatever the hell they called it, Mandy, don't bring up the lesbian thing because we're not ready to hear that. I said, I just came from two different groups of who I am, and one of them is telling me, don't be a lesbian over here being black, don't be a lesbian over here being now. And I'm thinking, this isn't right. Why can't I be black and a lesbian and support the National Organization for Women? Now, when I got pushback, I said, maybe we're getting pushback because people are not quite understanding about the connection. Now, oh, they brag about the lesbian program now. But when that Lavender Menace happened, so and, add it to any situation. When you say and, your whole world opens up because you're not defined by the only way you can get this done is that. That's a challenge for me. And I think the other challenge is when something came up in our lunch today. One of the members of the Black Cultural Center said his little nephews came up to him talking about the NBA. And the person sitting at the table said, you know, the NBA was never all black. At one point it was all white. He said, no, the NBA has always been black. Because that nephew, that's all he knew. I'm worried because our history is not being remembered. And when I heard, who's here at the Women's Center? Oh, feminist. Oh, I'm not a feminist. I'm post-feminist. No, you aren't. But when you don't remember your history or herstory, that concerns me because if you don't know where you came from and you're not in touch with that, then anything that comes after. How many times have you heard, we're the first one ever to do this? No, you're not. You're not. You can say, I'm continuing what came before me. That concerns me, and I'm worried that we don't find a way to capture our history. So these are all history projects, video, YouTube. I think these are great ways to make sure that we don't forget from where we came from. There would be some challenges. We're getting older. When I was getting ready for this ride, I was sitting down writing my speech, and I had to get up, and I heard this sound. Sounds getting older. Like it. Other? Come on, y'all. Or comments. I don't have to always have questions, you know.
Hey, just want to say thank you for making that drive. But I want to ask you, given the current political climate that we're in right now, do you think it's going to be more difficult for issues, as far as the not only the political climate, the depth and national depth and things like that? Do you think it's going to be harder for social justice issues to get put into law, and social services? Because I'm a social worker myself, and that's something that I'm worried about.
Right.
Is the tightening of budgets to
Yes, budget tightening, yes.
Do our job. So I just want to.
Yeah. Did you all hear that question? It's interesting. I have to tell you that I really follow more of my state politics in the state of North Carolina than I do national. Even though I look at national, I used to work up there. This election that just happened, I cannot tell you how many people stayed home. And I was asking, you saw the huge turnout for the 2008 elections with Obama and Hillary. People were out in droves. And I asked some of my friends why you didn't vote. And I'm just curious if you know folks who did and why they didn't. They said, well, why? We didn't have to. We knew we were going to win. I'm a poll worker. I saw who came through those polls on election day. So I will tell you this, that in the state of North Carolina, for the first time in 100 years, I don't know what your political affiliations are, it is Republican-controlled state house, Republican-controlled state senate, and they're ready to take everything back that we have struggled for almost 100 years. And everything's no, 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 no. We're going to take this, this, this. And also the state of North Carolina has a very tight budget crunch, just like other states too. And what they're using to justify why they're going to take women's services away, people of color services away, disability rights, we have a budget, so we need to take, we have a budget crunch. That's what they're using as a guise. Now, I'm assuming that what might happen, and I think it's going to happen up in Congress too, once you've had 2 years of these people who didn't want all this and we're going to take care of it, I think people are going to say, enough is enough, you all have made a mess. But they get to draw the congressional district lines for the next 10 years. That's really impactful, and it happened in North Carolina, and it happened in Minnesota. So I would say to you, remember, who asked that question, what can I get involved in? You find out who is sitting in the city of Nashville or the state of Tennessee about budget crisis, and have that, go to those meetings, because that's where a lot of activity is going on right now. And if you can find out why, you should be concerned around whether you're LGBT or people of color or naming, and if you're at those meetings, including you with social services, you're going to have some interesting conversations. And if ever there was a time to form some coalition around budget crisis, this is it. But also the other good thing, speaking of impact, start forming these voter coalitions now. If you think out the black vote, the Latino vote, the social justice vote, the women's vote, the environment vote, everyone who's going to be impacted by people who have to just turn the clock back, that's the other important conversation people are having right now. So if you can be around the table and thinking, yeah, what impact is that going to have on me or whatever? So budget, prices, voter coalition now, because the elections are coming up and they're already starting to do all their pre-election stuff now. And I would suggest to you that you do that. Let me ask you this. When you said you're in social services, like what particular thing?
Well, I'm in graduate school for social work, so I'm my master's.
Okay, so you're your master's. Well, I'll tell you what. Who was I talking to earlier today? And I don't know if this is true. When I talked to TJ, I asked him, I said, what was the relationship with Vanderbilt here and the off-campus? And he basically, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but it was sort of like, here's Vanderbilt, here's the campus, and very much never between me. But that can't be true. There has to be some interaction, isn't there? Or is that right? And if not, what's up? Because I was just saying at Duke. Now, maybe because it's the geography of your place, but at Duke, Durham has a huge civil rights history that's so deep, I can't even begin to tell you. One of the bad things Duke does when people come to freshmen, they get there. Who's been at Duke? Has anyone been at Duke in Durham? you know, she would sit up. I can't believe this. What they tell students is don't wander off campus. Durham is a dangerous place to go. Dangerous place to go. Are you kidding me? Now, with Duke, because you have so many graduates of Duke who stay in the community in Durham, they have created this incredible, multiracial, progressive coalition that has had a profound impact on the city of Durham and the campus. And to give you an example, you have to find an issue that's relevant to everyone. You know how you have your athletes that wear all these uniforms, whether they're football or basketball? What's big on Vanderbilt? What is it? Basketball? Basketball? One of the big issues came, who's making these uniforms? Sweatshops. So one of the campaigns was organizing a non-sweatshop campaign to say, not my athletes on Vanderbilt and Duke will ever wear a piece of material from sweatshop. That brought the community together with Duke, and they came up with a on-campus, off-campus. The other one was anti-apartheid. Duke has one of the first campuses that had a lot of investments down in South Africa. So when the off-campus community and the on-campus community got together and said, we need to form a unified anti-apartheid campaign, we built little mini shanties on the Duke Quad. I was there. And we had rallies, we talked to faculty, we talked to students. And you know who cleans those rooms at Duke? What folk? Probably here too, black folk. That's who's cleaning those rooms. And when we had this conversation, we decided we were going to do a shanty town before the huge board of directors of Duke came together, just to have a presence. And in the morning, we were going to stand in silence as the board of directors were going by to go to their meeting. We just stood in silence, we had our shanty. And overnight, this is what I heard from the students. Oh, what are those people doing here? I mean, really negative kind of stuff. Oh, nothing's going to change, whatever. But we were there. Now, here's the thing that was most amazing to me. Because Duke workers are predominantly black, both those who serve the meals, make the beds, do the garden, puts the maintenance on the whatever. They decided, knowing that their jobs may be at risk. Someone said from the administration, go take those shanties down. And the black workers said, no, we're not going to take these shanties down because we're in solidarity with the anti-apartheid movement. You know how profound that was? And for 1 second, the students, the faculty, and the workers got together and understood we have a vested interest. For 1 second. The next day they went right back to where they were. You know how profound that was? But more importantly, what do you think the board of directors voted to do? Divest. Had we not taken the chance, had we not had people speak up and talk about this issue, and they voted, and because, you know, Duke is pretty, you know, influential, then campus after campus after campus said, see what Duke did? This is what happens with the power of one. But to have the workers say, we're not going to take those shanties down, knowing their jobs were at risk, and then going back the next day and they were going right back to the roles they had, I cannot tell you how disheartening that was. But for a minute, a glimmer, that's the power we had at that university. That's the potential. And there again, we had something that we had in common, off campus, on campus. I don't know if there's like something that would click that would make Vanderbilt and Nashville be like, you know, getting it. But why not try? I mean, we're in this moment, in my opinion. I think we could do that. And I will tell you this, with the Obama re-election campaign already gearing up and going, and anyone who's local, I mean, the power of the vote is essential. People died for that vote, women and people of color. So that would just be a snapshot, I think, of what's at risk and how simple it is to say, I'm willing to take a chance on this. No guarantee whatsoever. But we've seen time and time again when it's made a difference. So just a thought. Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, I just want to say thank you for speaking again. You spoke about President Obama, and then you spoke about kind of uniting the community. I guess, especially because you are a black lesbian, and you should talk, how do you kind of, I mean, do you struggle with his position or non-position on gay marriage? And what do we do as a community to kind of, to make sure that our leaders are the leaders that we should have?
Right. Good question. Now, I have to tell you, I have to tell you, every once in a while you get a little pressure doing this stuff. And I'll be honest, when the 2008 elections were coming up, Hillary was my first choice. You know why? Men have screwed up so many times. I don't think, no, I'm sorry, don't disrespect. So I said to everyone, Obama, yeah, we could make it, but we need a woman. I also said that whoever wins that primary gets my vote and can get my support. Now think about this. This country, when we had the founding fathers who had to have slaves in order to run, to get to be whatever, in 2008, Hillary Rodham Clinton had an LGBT advisory committee for her campaign. I was on it. I was working the polls on May 7th, and I saw that was going to be the deciding day whether Hillary or Obama would get the nomination. I saw who showed up at the polls at 6, and we didn't even open the doors at 6:30. I knew Obama would get it. So sure enough, a few days later, so Mandy, Obama's thinking about maybe forming his own LGBT pride something or something. Do you want to be on it? Yep. This is the thing about Obama, and this is another pisses me off. This idea that the LGBT movement basically said this: Obama, you're the president, we want this now. We want marriage, we want da-da-da-da-da. And I thought the man just got in here. And he had gone out and said very clearly what he could or couldn't do. And I'll tell you this right up. Once you become the president, you're not a candidate anymore. When you become president, that's not even you. That's an office that's going to be whatever that is. It's like an institution of itself. So Obama, even to get as far as he did with the don't ask, don't tell, and again, I was not happy with that, but you know, he did. Now with the marriage thing, he made it very clear right from the beginning. I don't mind domestic partnership, but don't call it marriage. So I want to know why all these people are out here nagging this guy about, I want marriage and I want it now. He may or may not change his mind on that, but it's not him. It's the Senate. It's the House. There's all these other people. So I have to say that I think we should just back off a little bit. At the same time, you always want to make sure that you're being conscious about what role he can play, but also realize other priorities than marriage. I want to be honest. Is there not more important things than marriage? People getting married, and again, why do we have to get married to get this stuff? So if that's what you meant about my concern, I would say, yeah, I'm concerned, but not to the point where I'm going to say I don't like Obama. I've heard people say this: if Obama does not give me marriage before the end of his term, I'm not going to vote for him in 2012. What is that? That's crazy for them to do that. So I think we need to just be a little bit more, the LGBT movement as a civil rights movement should be a little bit more sensible and think about not just them, because there's other priorities right now in terms of what Obama, jobs are one, what's happening internationally, it's insane what's going on out there. So that would be my end. What would you say? How would you answer your own question? What would you say that?
I guess I struggle with it because if he had taken a position either way, yes, he was clear, but even throughout this entire debate about marriage, he's come out and said that I'm still struggling with it.
Right.
I think that what we needed from him as a leader of the country, was a sign of support with our cause,
Right.
Public support,
Right.
And I think that's just been lacking. And he's kind of deferred and he's kind of deflected,
Right.
And I think that is, I take it as insulting, especially because even if he did make it clear that he wasn't a fan of marriage,
Right.
we saw him as an ally.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just
Doesn't seem
that way. We're just not clear,
Right.
and that's.
And I can understand. I was actually talking to a good friend of mine, Brian Bond, who's the LGBT liaison, and he said this is interesting because what we see sometimes out here is not really the reality of all the behind-the-scenes stuff. When he was doing all that behind-the-scenes stuff for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, people were furious. You're not doing it quick enough. But what happened? He got it. And I think people just have to understand that the way DC works and the way in which you can make change is different than how we perceive our whatever. So I would say to you now, for him to say, I'm thinking about it, that might be a little way of him saying, I'm not so sure that I'm not ready to maybe make that happen. But we just get so impatient. I'm just stunned. And the stuff that I saw what people said about Obama when it wasn't quick enough, I was just curious about it. I said, slow down. And when he did come through with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, did all these same people who were yelling and screaming at him and saying horrible things ever say, by the way, thanks? It was just like, and I looked on these websites, and I'm stunned to see this very toxic stuff, because it's not good enough, and you just said it, mine.
Right. I guess it's not so much timing. It's more of message.
Okay.
And yeah, it's just, for me, it's about message, and sometimes I just don't feel that the message is
Right. Are you like,
strong.
did you vote for Obama in the first one?
I couldn't.
Oh, okay.
So,
Next time coming up.
yeah, but I think that we were looking for leadership, and
Right.
he stands for all these things. And I remember when I was in high school and was watching the debates, there was a moment, and Hillary did it too, where they were talking about marriage, and they deferred, and they go, well, we believe, we want gays to be able to visit their partners in
Right.
hospitals, great, and that's the benefit we have. But it's almost insulting to us that like, well, we're going to give you this now. Hold on to that.
Right.
We'll think about the rest later. And I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I can empathize. I can hear, because I think when you realize, think about the other movements that have come before, and when you think about when you almost know that you can almost touch it and see it, and you're wondering what do you need. But I would also say to you, however, is that when you consider that we're looking at a presidency where I had a 98-year-old black woman come to my voting place, and she said, I thought I would never live long enough to see a black man. And when you look at that reality, then it's almost like you have to just put it in perspective, and I understand. On the other hand, I think there needs to be some sense of he's not doing enough for me. He's not doing enough for and I think that's the part that's irritating, because there's other people who need to make a living. They need to figure out how they're going to have a place to live. That's another priority, and I feel like people are kind of pulling at him. And so I would just say, just a little patience. You can still be critical and still be a way in which you can figure this out, but also realize that one person doesn't make that difference. You have the House and the Senate, you go down the list. I mean, in other words, he's not the only one. Look at the other list of folk that you really need to influence that will make a difference too. Are you living here in that? Are you Tennessean or?
No, I'm a Vanderbilt student. So
I'm sorry?
I'm a Vanderbilt student, so yeah.
Oh, you are? Okay, great. Yeah, but I mean, so just realize the reality of that presidency. People come and go through that thing all the time. So what is it that you get so unique about that institution? So, right. Other? How are you doing? We've got 15 minutes. I got nothing to do after this. So.
I guess not to dwell on the negative or anything, but when you were talking about 2008, I guess another thing came to mind, the Prop 8, I guess, debacle, basically. The whole, they said like 90% or 70% of black people voted for it, this, that, and the other, and which turned out to not be true. On top of that, CNN itself admitted that the poll was unscientific. So I was wondering about your thoughts on that with regard to how far, I guess, we really have come, so to speak.
Don't even get me started about Prop 8. I'm not kidding. I'm going to be teary-eyed about this. When you know that you have a black man about ready to make history in this country, and you're sitting out here in the state of California, understanding the importance about marriage equality, and you had not one black person sitting at that table when this strategizing was going on. None. And every face and every issue and every person was white. I'm just going to put this on the table. And the nerve. And knowing that you don't think there was going to be a huge number of people coming out to vote on that historic election? You did not know this? And you didn't have any inkling to call. We had one of the most respected black ministers in San Francisco, call and say to them, I'm willing to figure out and have a conversation with you. Amos Brown called them, Equality California. What can I do? Not one call got returned. Not one. And Alice Huffman, who's sitting up here as the chair of the California Democratic Party, calling down, you all need to know now, when you turn out that black vote, they're going to be voting for Obama, and you know you have this issue on Prop 8. Nothing. Millions upon millions of dollars were poured into that state from all kinds of interest groups. And the very next day, I'm turning on my television, and the first person I see is a white lesbian who I know, who had the nerve to say, and we don't know why the black community didn't understand about why civil rights makes. I was ready to throw that TV out. I couldn't believe it. The nerve. Never, and at least put it in and third on our list, but to be the first group. We came this close, and we might have already missed a lot of folk around this issue about allies. You hear what I said to you earlier about if you don't see us and you don't hear our stories and our lives, why should we care? So now, you're having another meeting. What are we going to do now? Did you bother to ask anyone from the African American community? And you know who else they can bring to the table? Faith people. People of faith. So when you bring this issue, it's not you. This is one of the most selfish, me, mine, I want, and never bothered to even think about the consequences, what they needed to do about this conversation. And I'm going to tell you right now, Mandy Carter, who has been an ally and a bridge builder all of my life, is about ready to move this thing called the LGBT movement. It keeps on looking like this. And they're now sitting there talking about, well, what are we going to do now? And remember when Ted Olson, who's the other gentleman, came together and wanted to create this, yeah, you know what, who are these people? We're the ones who should be doing this. We're, you know, and they're about ready to win. So this really self-centric, I, my, us only kind of stuff, there's going to be a lesson learned. And you know, California, didn't I just tell you that it's majority people of color? Hello? So I would say to you, in a way, it was a major wake-up call. And a lot of people looked in the mirror the next day and said, boy, did we blow it. But unfortunately, they're just doing the same thing. So I would also say, though, I think the other lesson learned on that is that when you're about ready to do a major thing like marriage equality in the state, you've got to look at the ballot and see who's going to be on it before you decide to go that year, because that's exactly what happened. Now, no doubt there were some black folk who didn't like it. I'm not saying they didn't. But to take the major burden and say it was the black community who made the issue, no. And I also think that they had actually a wonderful faith-based meeting about why were we not included in that conversation. So some good things came out of it. And you know, talk about marriage. One of the first groups who came and supported marriage equality was the Japanese. Because while we might have black, white in the South, and when you get to the West Coast, it's Asian Pacific Islander, it's Latino, Hispanic. So they got it, they knew it, and they understood it. They said, we know this issue. But again, this idea that we got the money, we know what we're doing, it's all right, I don't understand that. And I'm not sure why people are not quite getting that. That this includes all of us, and we have to figure out how we have this conversation. So do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to add that I thought it was interesting how, like, the other faith-based groups, that the anti-gay ones, the Mormons, for example, the Catholics, they actually went out and did the canvassing and, you know, among people of color, and they were able to get their message
in our community. See, I mean, even the opposition understood. That's a great question, and I promise I won't get well. Hey, I was just talking about you. This is right. We're just talking about we might have Kim because we have woke up and this is the brother, right? I was going to say that earlier, but you weren't in the room. But thank you for that. Anyone else? We got another 10 minutes. Yes. Here, here, and here. 1, 2, 3. And that might be at 4, and that might be it.
I have a comment and a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good? All right. One of the things you talked about was, you know, when you were organizing and you called one of your supporters from Song, I believe, was a black lesbian. You wanted to support the cucumber movement and supporting workers.
Yeah.
Right. And it just made me think of a few years ago, I was working for TURC. TURC is a local organization here, Tennessee Immigrant Refugee Rights Coalition. I was their voter registration coordinator. And there's a local talk radio show host. He's African-American, also a minister, and he had a protest with the Minutemen in the heart of downtown, and basically, he was asked for myself and one of my colleagues, Keith Caldwell, to be on a panel, and you just couldn't understand why I was doing voter registration with, for an organization like this TURC. I should have been doing it for NAACP, etc. And one of his comments that just stays with me and just made me think of it was, Juan, your name is John. Assimilation is key. Assimilation is key. Don't call me Kunta. Call me Toby. Assimilation is key. And so I guess my question is more, because that's the reality still in this day, looking at, because I know for myself, I'm feeling kind of divided, and I do LGBT work here, and I do, maybe living wage and, organizing with council members and grassroots organizing through my job. And so more, the how as far as you do community organizing across differences.
Right.
So that's my question.
How would you answer that question for you, Alyssa? How would you answer it for you?
I mean, I feel like I'm struggling to do that. And I've started now, even though I never thought I would do faith work. I'm doing more interfaith work and working with IMF, which is, I kind of have a long haul, and so I guess that's how I'm doing it. And also through my job, I do youth organizing, I do grassroots lobbying, and kind of like all my interests in one place. So, because I can't be a million places at once. you have to sleep, so.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right, but I have to say, I know for me, and I think everyone probably gets to that point in their life when they figure this out, that if I know that I can bring my whole self to whatever I'm doing, I don't have, remember I said I had to be black, lesbian over here, but if I bring all that under the auspices of equality and justice organizing, it's almost like there's been a burden lifted off me, because my work then is defined by that. And then the key thing, I'll tell you what's been saving me. I learned how I don't let the calendar control my life. I control my calendar. There's only so many meetings I can get to. There's only so many emails I can answer. I have my laptop back where I'm staying, and I had to do some Facebook, and I thought, nah, that can just wait. I have to get over here. And in other words, you know what? It will be here tomorrow. It will be here another year. It will be. And if you get that in perspective of realizing that you don't want to burn yourself out, you got to keep on quality of life for yourself. But also, who else can you engage? I think oftentimes we just take on too much. I have to be the one who does this, 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 and this. There are a lot of people out here right now, I can tell you. There's a lot of hunger. People are looking for something to be engaged in. And what makes them nervous, they'll say, but Mandy, I'm not an organizer. And I said, well, what do you think an organizer does? And they made me a little more on this. And then I asked them something. I said, have you ever organized a birthday party? Well, what do you mean? Well, when you do a birthday party, how do you know what date to do it on? Well, obviously the date of the birthday, whatever. And how much food do you know? How much food do you know to order? Well, we're going to probably have 20 people. Well, how do you know you're going to have? By the time they get done, they just organized. But they think there's this mystical thing about being an activist organizer. But if you let other people get in and take some of that stuff that you would just call whatever, and let them be involved with it. I always thought there's got to be some way in which you partner with, give it away, we need help, and most importantly, no previous experience needed. You'll have a lot more people coming forward. But taking care of yourself, I think, is real pivotal. And I know for me, I used to be 24/7. If that phone rang at 3 in the morning, I was going to answer it. No more. My hours are, if you call my phone, this is what you get. Hello, you reached Mandy Carter. It's Tuesday, February something or other. And sorry if I missed your call. Leave your message and I'll get back to you as promptly as I can. My office hours are Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and that phone goes off at 5. Because whatever they had to say to me will be ready to be here on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But it's hard to do that when you're like so driven. But life is short. And there's got to be a way in which we, again, don't let the calendar control us, we control our calendar. It might be a simple way to say it, but I just think we need to bring more folk into this effort. It's all we're doing. There's a lot of people who would love to be doing it. Isn't there something you could tell someone else to help do with you or whatever task you're doing? Is there?
Yeah.
Are you asking?
Yeah. you don't believe me. I mean, I feel like I ask and people are like, oh yeah, I really want to be a part of doing LGBT organizing, but then you call them and...
Yeah, okay. And now I'll throw this out. Remember how someone came to my high school? And I didn't know nothing from nothing, someone came in? Now are you asking people who are already too busy?
It doesn't seem like it.
Oh. It's not busy, right? Well, it's busy. Anyway, but that might be the only answer, but I think that's a way to think about it. We got one in the back, and then what's the name over here? And then we'll take them all. All right.
And I know we have a bunch of questions, so I also want to remind folks that tomorrow Mandy's going to be at the Community Partnership House at noon for a brown bag lunch discussion on activism as a form of service. So if folks are able to come to that, there'll be more opportunity to have a conversation too. So
we'll take these last 5 and that's it, right? I got nothing but time, y'all. Hey, there's not a Duke women's basketball game on there, so I have priorities.
I want to thank you for your speech. My question is, you made several references to living wages and employment protections. And one thing that I've been frustrated with over the last few years is that I feel like that's one issue that will probably impact the greatest number of people in the community. But the major media that I see, the organizations, they don't seem to really be making that a priority. I was wondering if you could provide some insight as to why that seems to be.
You talking the local media, national media, or?
National.
Okay. Yeah, I really don't. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I'm really struck by how media decides to make something the issue. Do you notice that? And it's out there for a minute, and then people's attention span are like very short. I think sometimes it might also be what media. I think with the internet, if you know Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman, if you get that on the internet, go there, because you're going to find that conversation. And media, mainstream media seems to be more, and I'm not really an expert, I don't know, people might know media more, but they seem to be more driven by whatever the latest controversies, whatever the latest, like look what's happening in Egypt, you know, so they get pulled over here. And I'm not sure why they feel like you can't handle more than one or two issues. But also domestic policy about living wage campaign is really not sexy or romantic. It's almost as if it's not like something that people would be interested in. So I would say to you, I can't say ignore media, more important to get the work done. And figure out what the infrastructure is, because I know we have a huge living wage campaign in North Carolina, which is right next door to you. So maybe it's more about how we can utilize other social media, how we get together and talk about the kind of organizing we're doing, and make the work happen versus whether or not the media pays attention or not. Because it's really more about the work. That would be my opinion. But also I think it also depends on what organizations, like unions are really big and should be even bigger on this issue. And if they were elevating that, but you know where we need to bring this up more than ever is that Democratic National Convention of 2012. But don't wait until it comes. Start now to figure out how that gets on the agenda, because every one of those national conventions, and oh, by the way, if any of you want to go, you should really think now about maybe being a delegate. But if you have these, they do local stuff to figure out what's the local issue for Tennessee, how do we put that on for the agenda of your Tennessee delegation, and then have them bring that to the table. And if you could collectivize that with North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, name it, then all of a sudden it really gets elevated in a major way. So I would suggest that. But don't care about media, and just think about the real work that needs to happen. Who else had their hand up? One back here and then one here? Yes.
How you doing, first of all? Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to say thank you, really. I'm black lesbian in Nashville, and actually I'm in therapy right now. I have this rage about these issues, and my partner here is trying to help me with this type of issue, and I hope to be as calm as you one day. But I've had these issues in Nashville the most intensely that I've ever had it in my life, as far as job issues, as far as discrimination issues, right here on West End. So I just want to say thank you for bringing the topic up. It's necessary. And to Melissa, I can tell you why a lot of people are hesitant with that sort of thing. It's just, it's so much, it seems like sometimes.
Too much or so much?
It seems like so much. It seems like a big hill to walk up. And although it is worth it every step of the way, I mean, my 93-year-old grandmother died happy because she was like, wow, you know, she saw Obama on Life magazine, and she stared at this man for hours a day because that was the most unbelievable thing she had ever, she couldn't believe it, you know. So, but it is worth it, the step up and doing what you have to do, but it does seem so big. I mean, it's a lifetime, you know, so many lifetimes. So, but it is something we can conquer together. But, so just thank you very much, and keep bringing these topics up.
I'm glad you got the support system there.
We argue often.
Not win or lose, but who ends up, you know.
Who wins?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to put it that
she
way.
wins. Even if I'm right. And I've seen you somewhere before, I just don't know where. Very handsome, thank you very much.
You know, I need to share something that you just said. I don't know if people really can comprehend what that Obama win was. 400 years of slavery. And to think that that journey, in fact, I remember thinking I had to talk about what they call the Middle Passage. And the reason why it's called the Middle Passage is that it would start out in Europe with a lot of goods, go to Africa, drop off that product, pick up product, which is human beings, men, women, and children, on ships for months at a time. And if you died, they threw you overboard. If you drain the ocean between Africa, South America, Central America, North, the bones of our ancestors, that's how deep and profound this is. And then if you made it to this country, your family would be torn apart. You don't know where they were. And the absolute deepest inhumanity on this set of people, let alone people who were already here, and what we saw. And every time you think you've seen the last of what could be perceived and described as man's inhumanity to man, you find something that can top it. And when you think about the South, literally was born on the back of black folk in terms of cotton. That's why we have the South. So to know that that journey to where we are now, in fact, Obama and Michelle and the kids went and stood in the portway of one of these places you could fit maybe 10 people, but you get so many more, and they were there. You almost have to experience that. So when I talk about this, I'm putting it in context of what that was. And yet, I had said earlier, with all of that insanity that we saw in this country, the fact that in 2008 we had the options of a man and a woman, that restored my faith, and it told me there's a moral compass in this country. Something is out there that makes that possible. So when your 93-year-old grandmother and this 90-year-old mother who had her son, grandson, great-grandmother, whatever, you know, the lineage, was sitting in a wheelchair, because, you know, we have this thing called curbside voting. She couldn't even come into the voting booth in North Carolina. And I have to be nonpartisan when I go out. But when she told me her story, and I was walking back, I said, my God, and she said, I thought I would never live to see the day. This is how deep and profound this is. So I get really touchy when people start kicking this guy, because it's all what he represents. But I would also say one more thing to you about too much. Maybe it's because we look at things like too much. If we took a little piecemeal, you take a piece here and a piece here, I think we don't have to look at it like this, all this big thing. If I know, like for instance, this is what happens. I want to be an organization and I want to take care of everything from environment to whatever. No. I know, Michael, you're going to take care of the environment thing. I don't need to do that anymore because I don't trust you to make sure that that happens. I'm going to more be, if I know that I know you can be involved in figuring out when you do a meeting, is there a bus route to the meeting? Don't assume everyone drives. But once you start chunking that out, then all of a sudden what looks like this huge, impossible task becomes very manageable. But it takes coordination, it takes communication, but this society is so me-my. We are just tuned in from the beginning. It's all about me, mine, I. And if you can bust out of that narrative and figure out how you do bring all these different folk together, it makes the task much easier, and it doesn't burn people out, you know? And I hear the frustration, but you need to figure out what to do with that as well. But I take this very seriously, but I do have a sense of humor as well. And you know what? Life is short. And it also could be this. I might not get it done in my time frame, but I'm looking at the folk who came before me, who helped me get where I am, and I'm thinking of everyone who's going to come after me. And if you think of it that way, then it seems to just take some of that burden off, and I know my shoulders get a little up here versus like down. Just a thought. Who's the last person? You it? Okay, you're it. Oh, you can one more, and then we'll get you in. Okay.
All right. So it's kind of a question, comment thing. In your speech, you talked about equality a lot, and kept using that word equality. And like throughout my life, I've always used that word equality, equality, equality. But recently, I've moved towards this concept of equity. And whenever I bring it up, people like always get confused and stuff. But basically what I think is equity. For example, I think equity is the right word to use now. And for example, if me and you are standing in the crowd, me and you are standing, and my friend Mia is like, I'm gonna give both of you $10. But if I have $0 and you have 40 already, and she gives us both $10, I still have 10, and now you have 50. And I think that's what we need to try to move towards, because like that's fair. Not like that. Because if we use equity,
yes,
we're not equal. We're
that's
still on different planes.
That's good. So what would be the way you would resolve that problem if I have 40 and she's going to 10-10?
Give me 40.
But you just said in 1 minute what an economic professor would take maybe 3 weeks. You know what I'm saying? That's a good way to put it, like real simple and concise. And it is about sharing. It's not about me, mine, I have, and there's got to be some more way. And it might not also be money. It could be stuff.
Yeah.
I'm living in Durham, where every time a house gets torn down, we turn it into a seeds. We grow garden. We grow food. And so you're getting rid of a house that's all dilapidated and whatever. It becomes a place where people grow food. It gets right into the community. And any leftover goes to the farmer's market, and that money gets kicked back. And this is just about resources and people. But I like that. That's a great way to say it. And what about this me, mine, I want? And, I mean, how much money can you spend? You know, I mean, really, who's this the people who are putting together, we're going to share our wealth. The guy who does Microsoft.
Bill
And,
Gates.
what? Who? Yeah, Gates. Now, I'm glad they're doing that because it's a sense of signal. On the other hand, we've got to get over this profit motive. This idea about profit over people is really what the mess we're in. I'm not saying if you don't want to go make a living, you make a good one, capitalism. But when it comes at the price of people's lives, you have to wonder how, what's the deal? And how do we talk about that real, down to earth, let's share, let's figure it out. And there's nothing wrong, and socialism is not a bad word. But this idea about one person has all this wealth, and then there's all these people who have nothing. And every year, people die from the cold because they can't afford to pay for that electricity. That's obscene. Or people every year die from the heat because they can't afford it. That's ridiculous. There's more, and when farmers are being paid not to grow crops, to control the price of food, what's that? So if you figure all that stuff together about this equity, I like that. It's good.
And because what I need and you need is totally different.
Yeah.
And like equity can be not only for money but for like race. It can go into race, like gender, like all that stuff.
Like it. It's good. We should elevate that. I think you're the last person. We're going to go with you. Marissa. Yes. Oh! Now, this is my dear friend. Why don't you do it and we'll do Marissa last? Yeah.
I just wanted to say that listening to you talk about getting involved in the living wage, all of a sudden I had this memory of Vanderbilt Environmental Services, 2 women being on a billboard up on 21st Avenue. Oh. And so I Googled it and read about it while I was listening to you. And in 2005, there was a living wage campaign because the average wage in Nashville, minimum wage in Nashville was $9.50. And Vanderbilt was only paying $7.55. And where I found the information was on a student organization page at Vanderbilt. Yeah. And there were 24 professors who supported the endeavor. And they actually won and raised wages for Vanderbilt, the lower income workers at Vanderbilt. And so it's right here in our own. In our own right here? I mean, I work at Vanderbilt and didn't even know about it at the time. Never would have crossed my mind to get active with something like that. So thank you.
Good.
For making that connection. Because that did make it to the mainstream. The way that I made the connection was thinking about seeing people that I knew on billboards.
Like it. Well, we're going to take the last question from her. And I want to thank you for all your patience. I'm not sure if you came in here thinking it'll be a quick half hour. I'm out of here. I appreciate that you come in. So you do have the last question and/or comment.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here, Mandy. I'm Marissa Richmond of the Tennessee Transgender Political Coalition. I've worked with Mandy before. I'm just going to follow up with just 2 comments. First, when she talked about being a delegate at the conventions, I was a delegate in 2008. Was one of only 2 out LGBT delegates from the entire state of Tennessee. If you want to help us be part of that in 2012, I'm willing to work with you. Just please come see me and I'll talk with you and show you how to run and get people, and so you can be in Charlotte in 2012. And then secondly, going back to your original question, how do you get involved? We got 2 major events coming up in less than a month right here in Nashville. A week from tonight, the Metro Council will be voting on a contract non-discrimination ordinance. We need you in the next 7 days to contact your council members. Because if you live on Vanderbilt's campus, as Christine Lalonde, who's already on board, but across the Metro, we need people to contact council members. And then a week from tonight, come down to the courthouse, 6:30 p.m. To show, we're asking people to wear purple, by the way, to show your support for equality. And then 3 weeks from today, on Tuesday, March 1st, we have our state lobby day at the state capitol downtown, Advancing Equality Day on the Hill. We're bringing in people from all across the entire state to meet with state legislators. We've got 2 pro-LGBT bills and then a whole bunch of anti-LGBT bills. We have a lot of work to do, and we need people from every state house and state senate district. You can Google our group, the Tennessee Transgender Political Coalition, or you can Google the Tennessee Equality Project for either event, either next week or March 1st. That's how you get involved. Thank you, and thanks for being here.
All right, thank you. So let me just wrap up and I don't know if you have any closing things you want to say, TJ. Let me just wrap by saying, first of all, thank you so much. I want to just read again the co-sponsoring organizations, and if any of you are connected to these, just raise your hand or let me know. The Vanderbilt University Office of Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer, and Intersex Life. Who's here from that group? Office of the Dean of Students. Oh, who's her brother who's also had family in Albany? Wait a minute. Dr. Dobson. With the Bishop Joseph Johnson Black Cultural Center, Leadership Development and Intercultural Affairs. Anyone here? Women's and Gender Studies Department, Multicultural Leadership Council, the Community Vanderbilt, chapter of NAACP. I'll be meeting with you all. When am I meeting with them? Wednesday? Tomorrow. And the Office of Active Citizenship and Service. All right. Well, to you all, I say thank you. Please go to the back table, take that stuff, and I'll be out saying hi to people as you go. Are we good? Are we good? We're good. Good.
And thank you, Mandy, and also for any undergraduate college students in the room, whether you're at Vanderbilt or any institution in the area, please register for Out in Front. This will be an opportunity for college students to get involved and learn about leadership on college campuses. So go to our website. It's next Saturday, the 19th. We have a full day of workshops, so please go to the site and find out.